Without wasting any time, let's read your unpopular Disney opinions. Eric M. says, while I really dislike how Disney handles Star Wars and Marvel, I think their first few projects with both franchises were okay. Things started going downhill in 2017. Okay, I will start with a huge unpopular opinion of mine. I never cared for Star Wars. It's not like I think it's bad or anything, but out of the original 6 movies, the only one I can say I enjoyed was The Empire Strikes Back. Episodes 7 and 8 left me indifferent. And episode 9 might still be the worst theater experience of my life, but that's a story for another time. The only 2 Star Wars products that actually left an impact on me are Rogue One and Andor, which were made after Disney bought the franchise. I know fans haven't been happy with the other shows Disney produced, but since I haven't actually watched them, I can't say anything about them. I can discuss the Marvel Cinematic Universe though, as I've been following it since the very first Iron Man. From 2009 to 2017, the MCU produced the following movies. They aren't all masterpieces of course, but out of all of these, the only ones I would consider truly bad or disappointing are Thor: The Dark World and Civil War. Then, from 2017 to Endgame, we got these movies. In my opinion, Marvel started going downhill from Black Panther onward. I know this movie was loved by many, but honestly, I found it mediocre in 2018 and I still find it mediocre now. I don't know how T'Challa is in the comics because I've never read them, but at least in the movie, he wasn't an interesting character. But the real cracks began with Captain Marvel. I firmly believe the only reason this movie grossed $1 billion is that they sandwiched it between Infinity War and Endgame. T'Challa may be bland, but at least he doesn't get on my nerves as much as Carol. They wanted to make a girl boss character, but I felt she was insufferable. And then we have the post-Endgame era. After Endgame, I didn't feel the need to keep following these characters' stories, because it almost felt as if a chapter of my life was closed. I grew up with Marvel movies, and after spending a decade following these characters, I was ready to let them go. Kinda like Andy at the end of Toy Story 3. When Disney announced they were working on multiple TV shows and Phase 5, I had the impression they wanted to milk the cash cow. Still, I tried to give a chance to some of their projects. WandaVision, Loki, Black Widow, Doctor Strange 2, Eternals, Guardians Volume 3, Spider-Man Far From Home, and No Way Home. Out of all of these, the only movie I found good is Guardians Volume 3. The rest goes from it had potential but fumbled itself to garbage. I haven't watched the other products Marvel has churned out, and I don't think I ever will. They did something far worse than making me dislike everything post-Endgame. I don't care anymore about Marvel. The only Marvel product I am going to see is Beyond the Spider-Verse, which isn't tied to the MCU. Candy Star says, I remember that when I was a child I really liked certain parts of The Sleeping Beauty. I always find the moments of the movie where Aurora appears to be so boring. All she does is singing and I really don't like to watch those parts at all. Not even in the slightest. Instead I loved to see the prince or whatever he was in the movie fighting against the dragon. And my favorite part is to see the 3 good fairies making the dress and the cake. It was the best part of the movie. While I personally don't mind the parts involving Aurora, the cake scene and the fight with the dragon are far more memorable. Weep Guru says, hot take, The Owl House is actually bad. It's an overhyped show carried by animation and representation. Also, Milo Murphy Law deserves more seasons. It's the last good Disney show. Well, I honestly disagree with this. The Owl House does have good animation, but what actually carries the show is how it unravels its mysteries and the characters. Belos in particular is a fantastic villain who deserves all the praise. As for the representation, I think that was handled well. Lutz and Amity's relationship works surprisingly well because their personalities come before their sexualities. If you ask me to describe Lutz Noseda, there are plenty of things I would say before mentioning that she's bisexual. I haven't watched Milo Murphy's Law, so I can't comment on that. Emmy Ladybug says, Beauty and the Beast isn't as bad as people are saying. Belle's not full of herself. She's not a selfish person who thought she was above everyone. Everyone in the village she was living in was always avoiding her and mistreating her, calling her odd and a funny girl. And all because she liked to read. And Belle has even said to her father that she has tried to make friends and get along with the others in town. But she is an outcast and doesn't fit in. Wow, I wonder why she would want to get away from the town that constantly mistreats her. She and her father weren't useless to the town. They have a little farm where they were taking care of goats and chickens. Considering how many eggs Gaston ate, I'd argue that's a huge contributor to the town. I did read bad takes about the movie romanticizing Stockholm Syndrome or idolizing Gaston, but this is the first time I hear of this. I always thought it was pretty clear that Belle doesn't consider herself to be better than the villagers. She's just let down by their opinion of her, and as someone who has always loved reading books, I empathized deeply with her. Speaking of Gaston, he wasn't a hero. He was a narcissistic man who only loved Belle because she was pretty. He never really cared about her. That's why Belle doesn't pursue him. Hell, he tried to force her to marry him twice in this movie, one of them through blackmail, and the people still want her to choose him? Him? Unfortunately, people who think this to be true exist. I put them in the same category as people who think this man is a good guy. Gaston is the perfect example of a truly misogynistic character. She didn't marry the prince for his money. She hated him as a beast at first. If she were going to marry someone for money, she would have just married Gaston because he's someone who hunts for sport, owns many trophies for it, and has a huge house. He throws money around like it's nothing. He's not a peasant like people are saying he is. He has great influence over the town, and again can toss a bag of coins around like it's nothing. He's not poor. The beast lives in a castle, sure, but he has no political power over the town. His servants live horribly. His castle is in shambles. I don't think anyone who'd marry only for the wealth would choose the beast over Gaston. I actually never put too much thought into how rich the beast is, simply because that's not really important for the story. Yes, considering what Ladybug said, the beast isn't a Jeff Bezos. But I think people assume he's rich because we are inclined to think a prince who owns a castle doesn't have financial problems. But even if the beast was rich, it's clear Belle didn't marry him for his money. Unlike Gaston, Adam has a nice personality, and most importantly, he cares for Belle and doesn't see her as a trophy. Also, Belle doesn't choose the beast because she has Stockholm Syndrome. Wanna know how I know? When she finds out her dad is sick and the beast gives her a chance to leave, she leaves. Someone with Stockholm Syndrome wouldn't do that. Yes, even for a family member. She doesn't even truly love the beast till the end of the movie. When she gets home, she considers the beast her friend. It's not until she returns to the castle that she says she loves him, and the curse is broken. The reason people keep saying all these wrong things about Beauty and the Beast is cause of lack of media literacy. Because seriously, really? Where did these horrid interpretations of one of the most beautiful Disney films of all time even come from? People don't understand how redemption works at all, and it's pretty sad. Okay, I am about to go on a long rant because Beauty and the Beast is not only one of my favorite Disney movies, but also one of the few romantic movies I love. And it's insane how much people misread this story. People who call this relationship Stockholm Syndrome don't know what they are talking about. Let's explain why. Belle doesn't fall in love with Adam while she is his prisoner, and he doesn't change because of her kind ways. If you watch the movie, you will see it's the opposite. When Adam realizes Belle doesn't let him boss her around and pushes him away, it's him who realizes he has to change his approach. Then, and only then, Belle realizes that under the beast there is a nice human, but Adam's change comes from him. It's not like Belle says, if you behave well, I will become your girlfriend. And it's not even true that Adam caged and imprisoned her. Belle chooses to stay, and she does it to save her father, not because she had a crush on the beast. Her first reaction upon seeing him is fear. And unlike the shitty live-action remake, he lets her stay in a comfortable room. Since she's not in love with him, she attempts to escape, later gets out on her own to it, and doesn't think twice about leaving after his outburst of anger. She comes back, yes, but only because the beast risked his life to save her, and she didn't feel like leaving him to die in the snow. It's at this point that he changes his ways, and they begin to fall in love. It's Adam who chooses to let her go when her father needs her, and this is his big manifestation of love. Soon the last petal will fall, and he has found someone who loves him beyond his looks. He could force her to stay, but he lets her go, because he loves her. Belle is not a Red Cross nurse who changes a violent man with the power of love. It would be different if Belle fell in love with Gaston, because given how he treated her, he doesn't love her. Dynamic Hispanic says, the reason why Aurora doesn't have character to most people, even though she does, is because she was never the main character. The three fairy godmothers were. I hate that this is an unpopular opinion because it's true. Yes, the three fairy godmothers are the main characters of the movie, and it's also why they have more screen time than the princess. Dandy Candy says, people who say that Cinderella didn't need a man and should have just escaped her evil stepmother's house don't understand that Cinderella was being abused and she couldn't just escape that. I think it's really distasteful when they call her weak and helpless when she's in fact strong, kind, and caring. I absolutely agree, and the people who say that completely misunderstand her character. Cinderella is anything but weak. She endured years of psychological abuse after her father died, and still remained a kind person. I actually think the first Cinderella is way better than the second or third. Not saying those two were terrible, I'm just saying the first one is better, unlike some who think Cinderella 3 is better. Cinderella 2 is a pretty forgettable movie, although the segment with Anastasia is nice, but I like Cinderella 3 almost as much as the original. Kruchka YouTube says, I feel like almost every movie that they're making right now is just for money, except for my favorite, Zootopia 2. I hope this doesn't sound rude to you, but Disney absolutely made Zootopia 2 with the intention of making money. That's the sole reason they do anything. Profit. Also, I think that these people saying old Disney movies were better, now everything is shit, are just having sympathy for nostalgia. I don't say that these movies weren't better, because like I said, I don't really like their new ones. But I don't think that every one of them is shit. I don't know, but I'd rather watch Encanto than Cinderella or something. I guess we will have to agree to disagree. I personally would rather watch Cinderella than Encanto, but it takes all kinds to make a world. As for old movies being bad too, that's true. People often forget about these old Disney movies. Not everything Disney produces now is terrible, but for every good movie you get 5 awful ones. Gabby Clown says, I love the era of Disney when the animation was super sketchy and you could see the lines and it was a little messy. Robin Hood, the Aristocats, etc. I think that style was so incredibly charming and I miss it a lot. As a child, I liked 101 Dalmatians, Robin Hood and the Rescuers, precisely because the lines reminded me that people had spent hours drawing the movie so that I and others could watch it. In a weird way, knowing that so much time and effort had gone into something that brought me joy made me appreciate it even more. Lori Senpai-chan says, my hot takes. I love Frozen, and I never understood the hate behind it. I think it's overexposed. So I wouldn't call myself a Frozen hater, simply because I think it's stupid to label yourself as a hater of something. But I belong to the crowd of people who dislike this movie. As for the reason, it's two actually. For starters, at a certain point in 2013, Elsa and Let It Go were everywhere. Even 11-year-old me had gotten tired of constantly hearing Let It Go. And I won't deny that it influenced how I feel about the movie. But if we take that out of the equation, I also don't think the movie is that well written. I would need a whole video to explain why, but to keep it short, I don't think it conveyed its message well. I understand what it wanted to say and the message itself is fine. The problem is the execution. So in short, I think it's a very mediocre movie that won jackpot because of the Elsa Let It Go combo, and the overexposure surely didn't help. One final personal thing, I can't stand Elsa. I think the reason many people dislike Pobert as a villain is because the plot twist felt like they start off as good and then they say, nah, we lied, we're the bad guys. As in predictable. I still liked Pobert though. I don't know how well perceived the Pobert twist was because I haven't been following the internet discourse regarding this topic. But personally, I found it okay. It's not the best twist villain ever, but it felt more natural compared to Bellwether because it had more build-up. I found his reasons to be believable, and I didn't get the impression he became evil out of nowhere. The movie does have problems, but Pobert isn't one of them. I love Snow White, and I can't stand how people victim blame her or call her stupid, all because of the poisoned apple that she ate. My younger sister called her stupid. To make a comparison, the character on the right side of the screen is innocently naive but not stupid. The character on the left side is just an idiot. Belle doesn't have Stockholm Syndrome. She decided to take her father's place as her prisoner to save him while helping the Beast become a better person. I'm an I can fix him girly, okay? I already discussed this earlier, but I have to comment on something you said. There is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to help someone become a better person, but please be careful about who you are helping. I know that I can fix him or her is almost always said as a meme, but whenever I hear that sentence, I can't help but remember this abysmal book named After. If you're lucky enough not to know it, in short, it's a story of a sheltered girl who falls in love with a violent man named Hardin. Hardin is literally a walking red flag. He constantly mistreats the main character Tessa, he is possessive, and he even bets his friends he can take Tessa's virginity. They have sex, and he subsequently takes the blood-stained sheets to prove his victory. He doesn't love Tessa, he wants to own her. But this is all okay because Hardin had a troubled past, so his behavior is excused. And in the end, with the power of Tessa's love, Hardin changes. I wouldn't have a problem with this book if it portrayed this relationship as toxic, but it doesn't. I'm not saying this to attack or lecture you, Laurie, and I'm sure you meant I can fix him as a joke. Your comment simply allowed me to discuss this topic. One final thing. Belle doesn't reflect the I can fix him stereotype. She doesn't choose to help the Beast because she wants to fix him. It's him who made the first step. And after that, she gives him a chance. I really hope I didn't sound condescending. I'm just upset that society thinks it's right to give young impressionable minds these ideas that it's up to women to change a violent man with the power of love. Cinderella is a victim of abuse, and she's not weak. Her problems weren't resolved because of a man. She had struggles and wanted to fall in with the prince, something her stepmother wouldn't allow. I never understood why people assumed her problems were solved by a man. Did everyone forget about the fairy godmother and the mice? They were the ones who helped Cinderella. The prince is just a part of her deserved happy ending. I forgot to mention that the only good live actions were Cruella, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Alice in Wonderland and Christopher Robin. Those are my faves. I admit I haven't watched many live action remakes, simply because I can smell the stench of rotten just by looking at the movie posters. Out of those you mentioned, I watched Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast and Alice in Wonderland. Cinderella is a surprisingly good remake, and to this day, I consider it the best Disney live-action remake. It's nothing life-changing, but if you are bored and have nothing to do, I'd say to give it a shot. Beauty and the Beast 2017 is appalling, and since the original Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite Disney movies, I might do a comparison video in the future. I watched Alice in Wonderland only once as a child, and remember just fragments of it. The only thing I remember clearly is that once we got out of the cinema, my grandfather muttered, "I don't get these new Disney movies." Birdie Boys says, "Ever since Frozen, I grew to really dislike modern Disney's art style. Their animation has improved immensely, but their visuals are so boring, and I really don't like how they design women. I know people hate the bean-mouth Pixar style, but you know what? At least they're experimenting. I'll never forget when an Encanto designer said they had to fight with Disney on keeping one female character buff. I feel like people forgot how visually distinct Disney movies used to look. All the Disney movies absolutely were more visually distinct. For example, look at Sleeping Beauty. It looks like a moving medieval tapestry. It's different from, say, The Lion King or Robin Hood. They did try to make something different with Wish, but it didn't look that good. As for the way they design women, I think the worst examples are Anna and Elsa. Something about the huge eyes and the thin, upward-pointing nose makes them look like ugly pugs. Not to mention how they often have these constipated expressions on their faces. Inactive Horse says, "I don't care for most animal sidekicks in Disney movies, or other story media in general, since they are either useless and contribute little to nothing to the story, or are extremely annoying to listen to or look at, or worse, a combination of the two. I can understand this sentiment, although not all of them are bad. And if I had to rank my top 3 most hated animal sidekicks, they'd be number 3, the baby goat from Wish. And when he got a voice, it became 10 times worse. Here's a fun fact for you. In the Italian dub of the movie, the goat is voiced by Amadeus, a famous Italian showman. He's not a voice actor, and this is one of those cases where someone is asked to voice a character despite not having experience in the field, just because they are famous. To better make you understand what I mean, listen.
Ci sono. Tu l'hai aiutata a scappare! A quest'ora tutta Parigi sta bruciando per colpa tua!
È stata gentile con me, padrone.
Sei un idiota! Non è la gentilezza, la furbizia, è una zingara! Le zingare non sono capaci di vero amore! Pensa, ragazzo, pensa a tua madre!
Sono qui! Solo un secondo! Riprendo fiato.
Io parlo! Ah! Caspita, che voce suadente.
Number 2. The blob thing from Strange World. Literally contributes little to nothing to the story, and that one scene where it slid under the door to unlock it and then slid right back under so the dog could open it. It made me want to bang my head on the wall. I genuinely forgot this movie existed. It's probably one of the worst from Disney's catalog. Number 1. Olaf from Frozen. Literally the worst. Literally contributes nothing, and if he was cut from the movie, literally nothing would change. I just hate everything about him. I hate his design, I hate his voice, and I absolutely hate his jokes. The problem with Olaf is that he's not completely useless. He symbolizes how close Anna and Elsa were, and he is the one who frees Anna after Hans locks her up. But despite all this, he manages to get on my nerves in every single scene he's in. I cheered when he died in Frozen 2, only to roll my eyes when he came back. I apologize if my comment will hurt any Frozen fans who are watching this video, but Olaf may be one of the most annoying characters ever from a movie. Dumbas Productions says, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast was not some hero who just wanted to save Belle from her kidnapper. Putting aside the fact that the Beast literally didn't kidnap her, he is presented as not a good person from the beginning. In the beginning, Gaston wanted Belle because she was pretty. That's it. Not because she was smart or kind or anything. He was just attracted to her beauty, pun intended. And while it's not inherently wrong to want something because of their appearance, there needs to be more factors into why you want that person. It is mentioned by Belle that Gaston is rude, and it is shown by how he treats LeFou. And when he talks to Belle in the market scene, he tosses her book into the mud, while also asking how she can even read without pictures, and tells her that it's not right for a woman to read, because then she'll get ideas and start thinking. This is the guy everyone wants Belle to be with. And in the proposal scene, Gaston and Belle were not in a relationship. So this came out of nowhere for Belle. Side note, when she looks into the peephole and sees that it's Gaston, she noticeably rolls her eyes and sighs with annoyance. When she lets him in, she looks uncomfortable but is being polite about it. Meanwhile, Gaston sits on her chair and puts his dirty feet on the table while talking about their future together, having dozens of boys, no mention of girls, and being married together. Belle doesn't want this and goes to the door, and in the scene, Gaston pushes away the furniture and pins Belle to the door, and he literally tries to kiss her without her consent, before Belle opens the door to kick him out. Later on, Gaston throws a fit in the bar, asking, "How dare she reject me, Gaston?" And then he bribes a man who works in an asylum to send Belle's dad to one because he wants to marry her. And he uses this to blackmail Belle to get to marry him. And also, I doubt insane asylums were nice to their patients back in the time period this takes place in. And afterwards, he locks Belle and her dad in the basement to go kill the beast. Not to protect the people of the town or Belle, but for his own ego. I do not understand people who say Gaston was a victim in Beauty and the Beast because he just wanted to rescue Belle from the beast. Even though evidence proves he doesn't truly care for Belle as a person. So here's my hot take. People who demonize Beauty and the Beast always manage to get a chuckle out of me for how terribly they misinterpret the movie's story and message. Gaston mistreats Belle in every scene they share. He sees her as a trophy, he despises her hobbies, and tries to trap her father to bribe her into marrying him. I remind you, he threw her book in a puddle while the Beast gifted her an entire library. Look at Adam's face. Look how happy he is to share her enthusiasm. So, pray tell, where the fuck did you see Stockholm Syndrome? If anything, a character who truly suffers from this condition is Letante, who gets beaten and constantly humiliated by Gaston, and yet still sees the hunter as the perfect male role model. And the problem is Belle? If you think she is, please rewatch the movie while actually paying attention. Melody Starlight says, I feel like a lot of people misunderstand Snow White, in the original movie, not the remake, especially with the scene where the prince kissed her. He actually thought that she was dead, and it was supposed to be a goodbye kiss. Besides Beauty and the Beast, Snow White is the most misinterpreted Disney movie, so let's discuss it. The original fairy tale, I'm sorry to say it, is dated and full of questionable elements, because it is a product of its time. This is precisely why Walt Disney modernized the tale in 1937, adapting it for a contemporary audience. For example, did you know that in the original fairy tale Snow White was 7 years old? For obvious reasons, Walt Disney changed her age to 14, which in 1937 was an acceptable age to be considered a young woman. Thankfully, the ending was changed too. Originally, the prince found a 7-year-old girl in a coffin in the woods and decided to take her away, which couldn't be more disturbing. In the movie, the two meet first and fall in love. Then we discover that the prince has never stopped searching for her and finds her after much desperate wandering. To wake her, he doesn't make her spit out the piece of apple stuck in her throat, because it would be disgusting. In the movie, the spell is cured by true love's kiss. The moral is that love is the most powerful force and prevails over evil. But since we're still talking about a 14-year-old girl, the prince doesn't stick his tongue down her throat. He simply gives her a chaste kiss and then prays beside her grave, as if to say, I know my gesture can't help you, but I still love you. Plus, she is not a weak, submissive girl who is waiting for the prince to rescue her. Despite her being abused by her stepmother, she still remained kind to the animals, helped the dwarves with cleaning the house, hence why eventually they treated her like she was part of the family. Snow White may be a princess, but she has no problem getting her hands dirty. She doesn't crash at the dwarf's place, demanding to receive hospitality.
We'll clean the house and surprise them. Then maybe they'll let me stay.
Since they work all day in the mine, she makes herself available to do housework for them. But I imagine that for some people, being a willing woman who tidies a house in 2025 makes you a slave to the patriarchy. Yes, she accepted the apple from the old woman, who is actually her stepmother. But how was she supposed to know that the apple is actually poisonous? I understand the part of it was meant to teach kids not to accept things from strangers. At the end of the day, the original movie has a beautiful message. It shows that kindness can be a powerful weapon and not actually a flaw like how people see it nowadays, which is sad. And you shouldn't stop being kind even if you were mistreated. It is precisely thanks to her kindness that Snow White overcomes the wickedness of her enemy and is taken in by the dwarves. And the prince saves her precisely because he had also fallen in love with her kind personality. Just like Cinderella, Snow White's kindness is a weapon and a virtue. Nowadays, it seems utopian to imagine a kind woman. Us women must simply be kick-ass. We cannot be feminine, kind, and also badass. And I'm sorry to see this, because as Melody Starlight says, kindness should not be demonized. Sometimes a simple gesture of kindness is all it takes to make someone's day. Being kind is not synonymous with weakness. CD says, 2 of my favorite Disney live-action movies are The Rocketeer and Something Wicked This Way Comes. The Rocketeer has a very unique style to it, using the sense of adventure of Indiana Jones as well as the dramatic side of pulp stories. It also has a pretty memorable score by James Horner, and my personal favorite element is that it has Nazis as the villains. Pretty sick. There is nothing like seeing fascists get beaten up. Then there is Something Wicked This Way Comes, based on Ray Bradbury's novel of the same name. It's a dark, chilling tale, with easily one of the most memorable Disney villains, villains in Mr. Dark. It's mostly been forgotten, but it's certainly a memorable movie to me. I've never watched these two movies, so thanks for this suggestion, CD. I'm particularly interested in The Rocketeer, because I love to see Nazis get beaten up. When I have time, I'll check them out. Cartoon Chaos says, I don't actually like any of the movies that were made when Walt was still the head of the company. I know they're all classics, but they're far too slow and boring for me. Unlike I usually do with media, I can't even really judge it objectively, because I never sat through any of them in their entirety past the first half hour. There is nothing wrong with not liking certain movies, but I admit I'm a bit surprised by the fact that you used the words slow and boring to describe them. I wouldn't call Alice in Wonderland or Dumbo slow and boring, for example. Since you said you never sat through any of them in their entirety, I strongly suggest you give them another chance. Sometimes you have to be in the right mood for something. For example, the first time I watched Hannibal, I hated it and turned it off after 10 minutes. I tried again a year later, and now it's one of my favorite shows. The later 2D Disney movies are definitely my favorites. I love Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Emperor's New Groove especially. The Renaissance offered some of Disney's best movies, and I too have fond memories of The Emperor's New Groove. I definitely don't like the 3D ones as much, except for Wreck-It Ralph. It's just as good to me as the three just listed. But overall, even the popular 3D Disney movies, other than Encanto, Wreck-It Ralph, and Big Hero 6, even if they were good, just felt kind of bland and safe compared to some of their older work like Lion King, Aladdin, or Beauty and the Beast. I agree with this sentiment. There are some Disney 3D movies I really like, but most of them were too safe or just bad. Maxogir says, part of the different feel or why the older pre-2010s Disney movies hit better partly has to do with the fact that very frequently the villain wasn't killed or defeated by the protagonist singing a song or getting a power-up by finding their true self or whatever, but the villains frequently died just as a consequence of their own vile hearts. For example, Scar gets torn apart by the hyenas after openly bragging about how he's just using them, and they're disposable. Sykes from Oliver and Company gets run over by a subway train because he was so desperate to murder a little girl and her cat that he chased them into the subway tunnel in his car, trying to run them over. Gaston was so bloodthirsty he wanted to keep getting another stab in on the beast after already fatally wounding him, that he pursued him up a slippery roof in the rain and fell to his death. Cruella ended up in a car crash because she was that intent on getting revenge on literal puppies that she pursued them at high speed all over town. Frollo in Hunchback of Notre Dame was so possessive and lust crazy that he chased the woman who refused to bang him into a building surrounded by fire that could engulf it at any moment, and ended up falling into that fire. The list goes on. They're not defeated in some kind of combat by the hero most of the time. Instead, their own evil gets them killed in some way as a consequence of their actions, which actually works out better in a subtle way as a message for kids. This perfectly explains why I don't like modern Disney villains that much. Recently, Disney has been making either badly written twist villains, or villains that aren't actually evil but just traumatized victims. I get trying to make something different or just trying to give more nuance to the antagonist, but it got old fast. The worst offender of this is Abuela from Encanto. She has trauma, which means it's perfectly fine for her to treat her niece as garbage throughout the whole movie because Mirabel is powerless. And no, a dry apology at the end isn't enough. What frustrates me about Encanto is that it's almost a good movie, but they really fumbled the ending. I would love to see villains like Frollo or Scar again. They are charismatic and layered, despite being undeniably evil. And yes, showing that evil often gets punished because of its own wickedness is a good message for kids. I know others like this new approach to writing villains because they probably relate to it, but I've grown tired of it. I guess I suffer from the villain is generational trauma fatigue. It makes the movies feel less like a story and more like a therapy session for the writers. And sure, you can write about your traumas to get over them, but can we get something different every once in a while? One of the main reasons why I enjoyed Hoppers so much is that it didn't have a villain with generational trauma. And finally, Alex Sandokai says, okay, so here is the thing. Penelope going turbo is not the same as the others going turbo, mostly because of factors. Turbo went to another game, Road Blaster, because he was feeling like the kids didn't pay attention to him. He is such an egotistic that his first thought of action when someone is taking his spot is to immediately overtake him and try to take all the attention for himself. Not to mention that he forced himself into Sugar Rush, intentionally invading the game, taking over the kingdom, and even trying to delete the rightful ruler, just so he could rule. His actions were not only motivated by his ego, but he was able to jeopardize another game or even take control, and make another game character suffer in favor of him being in the spotlight. With Ralph, he wanted to feel valued in his own game, After being treated like the villain for 30 years and nobody appreciating him, he wanted to really be appreciated and went to take the medal in Hero's Duty for it, stealing Markovsky's outfit like Turbo, and went to the extent to get that medal. The consequences of his actions were that his game was going to be offline because he was needed in his game. Without him, the game doesn't work. Vanellope, on the other hand, she just wanted to race. That's all she wanted to do for all of her life. She didn't care to be the queen or anything. She just wanted to race, to feel free. When she entered Slaughter Race, she didn't want to take over the game or try to be popular. She just wanted to race on it because she loved the freedom the game gave her. While you could say that it is the same situation with Ralph, she argues that there are more racers than her and she won't be needed. If Ralph or Turbo aren't in their games, then the game doesn't work. If Vanellope isn't in her game, the game can still function thanks to the other racers, since you need a minimum of 9 for the game to work. Even the other Slaughter Race characters accepted her in because she wasn't really that much of a problem. Again, she didn't try to force herself or take over the game like Turbo did. In summary, Vanellope going Turbo is not as bad or as horrendous as Turbo being, well, Turbo. I thank this person for taking their time explaining their reasons in detail, which is why I will explain why I disagree in as much detail. The message of the original movie was, learn to accept and love yourself for who you are, regardless of the collective approval rating. The villain was Turbo, who was the perfect villain for this story because he, for his part, never accepted becoming a character in an outdated game. So instead he invaded someone else's game to take their place, continuing to be appreciated for something he wasn't. In Ralph Breaks the Internet, Vanellope behaved exactly like Turbo, if not worse. Turbo didn't want to be forgotten. Vanellope simply got bored with the game she was playing and decided to abandon it for the new, cooler game, thus dooming Sugar Rush. She is the princess, the game is her responsibility, and if players see their favorite character missing, the game will be considered broken and therefore scrapped. Vanellope made a selfish choice, which completely contradicts the first movie's moral about the character's responsibilities, and yet she comes out clean. And if the problem was simply that she wanted the new car and the new truck so much that she had to abandon everyone she'd made friends with, then she really is an exploiter. As soon as the cooler game comes out, she forgets about everyone and everything. Ralph may be clingy, but she considered him her best friend. If a friend does something that upsets you, at least you try to talk to them first before cutting ties. You don't just replace them with the newer, cooler racing car. This movie has a horrible message. The worst thing is that, in the end, it's Ralph who sacrifices himself once again, so Vanellope is seen as an ungrateful brat who never cared for him. Not only does she abandon her kingdom and her subjects without much remorse on a whim, but also her friend. This is why I hate the second movie. And with that, we are done. So what we got from your unpopular Disney opinions is that Beauty and the Beast constantly suffers from attacks from people who lack media literacy, modern Disney's art style is worse than the old one, and animal sidekicks are annoying. As always, thanks for watching and have a great day.